A widow's daughter risks her life to save an Apache chief and 3 warriors.
Turn around, child. They will come back. You shouldn't be here.
Hold still. I'm gonna get you out of here.
Then, 300 warriors ride to her ranch with a purpose she never expected. Red dust hangs over the silent hills of New Austin as 17-year-old Sadie Matthews rides home beneath the burning sun. Then she sees them, 4 Apache warriors tied to trees, left to die in the heat. One of them is Chief Rain's Fall, and he warns her to turn back.
Turn around, child. They will come back. You shouldn't be here.
Sadie has no backup, no time, and only a knife and a little water. She could ride away and protect the life she still has. Instead, she cuts them free.
Thank you very much, child. You have done enough. And be careful.
But her act of mercy will soon bring 300 warriors to her ranch, and the reason they come will reveal that Sadie's choice was far more important than she ever imagined. New Austin Territory, 1888. The land was merciless. It baked men to dust and swallowed the rest. Sadie was 17. She had blonde hair bleached nearly white by the sun, and hands calloused from holding onto a ranch that was rapidly slipping away. She lived with her mother, Abigail. Abigail was a widow with failing lungs. Her consumptive cough echoed through their wooden cabin every night. It was a dry, hollow sound. Sadie lay awake listening to it. Every morning, she brewed willow bark tea, checked the cattle fences, and worried about the bank. It was just the two of them against the dying edge of the American West. But Sadie was not raised to quit. She was the granddaughter of Major Hosea Matthews. During the Civil War, Major Matthews led the 3rd Cavalry Regiment. His mission at the Battle of Gettysburg was to hold the left flank against a charge that outnumbered his men 3-1. He held the line. He taught Sadie that you do not run when the odds turn bad. You plant your feet. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The heat was blinding. Sadie was tracking a stray calf near the southern ridge. She found no calf. Instead, she found tracks, deep grooves in the baked red dirt. The drag marks of heavy leather boots, the unmistakable tread of iron-shod horses. She followed the trail down into a narrow, dead-end ravine. The air was perfectly still. No breeze reached the canyon floor. The temperature easily topped 100 degrees. The heat radiating off the rocks felt like an open oven door. That was when she saw them. 4 men, Apache, tied to the trunks of dead ironwood trees. They were not just bound, they were secured with thick hemp rope and wrapped in strands of rusted barbed wire. Outlaws had left them to bake in the afternoon sun. It was a slow, agonizing death sentence. Sadie stopped. She slid off her horse and crouched behind a boulder. She evaluated the scene. One warrior, built broad and thick, was bleeding from a severe gash across his forehead. His chin rested on his chest. He was fading fast. Another, much younger, strained against the barbed wire. The wire bit deeply into his wrists. His hands were turning dark purple. He was losing his hands to the dead circulation. A third man slumped over, his lips cracked and white, entirely out of water and breath. But the 4th man was different. He was older. His face was weathered like the canyon walls. Despite the ropes, despite the searing heat, he sat perfectly upright. He was not panicked. He was not struggling. He watched Sadie step out from behind the boulder. His eyes were calm, dark, and calculating. He was Chief Rain's Fall. Sadie did not know his name. She only knew he had the eyes of a man who understood the world perfectly. "Turn around, child," the older man said. His voice was cracked but carried a deep, steady authority. "The men who did this will return. They will kill you." Sadie looked at the blood on the broad warrior's face. She looked at the young man's purple hands. She looked at the chief. She stepped forward, pulling the heavy iron hunting knife from her belt. "Hold still," Sadie said, her voice completely steady. "I can help." The chief watched her. "They are armed. They will not show mercy." "Then I guess I need to be fast," Sadie replied. She went to work. She did not panic. She did not waste a single movement. First, she approached the young warrior. His hands were the immediate crisis. The barbed wire was pulled taut, twisted in a heavy knot behind the tree trunk. Sadie wedged her knife blade under the wire, risking cutting her own fingers. She found a flat stone nearby and tapped the back of her blade, creating just enough slack. The wire gave way with a sharp snap. The young warrior gasped. Color began to creep back into his fingers. "Charles," the chief said softly to the young man, "stay still. Let her work." Sadie moved to the broad warrior. He was slipping into heat stroke. She unhooked her canteen. It held only a few warm swallows of water. She poured half of it onto her own cotton neckerchief and pressed the wet cloth against the man's bleeding head. She tilted his chin up and poured the remaining drops over his cracked lips. "Keep your eyes open," she told him. Next, she tackled the thick hemp ropes holding the chief. The knots had been pulled tight by horses. They were impossible to untie. She began to saw through the thick fibers with her knife. It was exhausting work. Her hands blistered. Sweat stung her eyes, but she did not stop. The chief watched her calloused hands. He noticed the heavy military-issue knife. "You have a soldier's steel," he observed quietly. "My grandfather's," Sadie said, sawing through the last strand. The rope snapped. The chief was free. Within 10 minutes, all 4 men were detached from the trees. They collapsed into the narrow strip of shade against the canyon wall. They were exhausted, battered, and unarmed. "My ranch is 3 miles north," Sadie said, wiping her brow with the back of her arm. "There is a fresh well. I will ride back and bring a wagon. Hide in the rocks until I return." "You have done enough," the chief said. He rubbed his wrists. He looked at the young girl with a profound, silent respect. "If you are seen helping us, your life will burn." "My grandfather told me we don't walk away from the flank," Sadie said simply. She walked back to her horse. She mounted up, looking down at the 4 men. "Stay in the shade. I'll be back by dusk." She turned her horse and rode out of the canyon. Chief Rain's Fall stood slowly. He watched the dust kick up behind her horse. In his 50 years of fighting, trading, and bleeding on this harsh land, he had seen settlers exhibit fear, hatred, and greed. He had never seen a young girl ride into a death trap, ruin her hands on barbed wire, empty her only water, and ride away to get more. Charles, the young warrior, flexed his aching hands. "Who is she?" "I do not know," Rain's Fall said softly, "but we will remember her." Sadie rode her roan mare hard. 3 miles of scrub and dust stretched between the canyon and her home. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders, but a cold dread settled in her stomach. When she cleared the final ridge, her heart stopped. 2 horses were tied to the front post of her cabin. Both mounts were branded with the star of the new Austin Marshal Service. Marshal Joel Miller and Deputy Tommy stood on the wooden porch. Marshal Miller was a hard, unforgiving man. He had a scarred jaw, cold eyes, and a reputation for shooting first. He stood tall, talking to Abigail. Sadie's mother was leaning heavily against the doorframe, coughing into a white cloth. Sadie slowed her horse to a walk. She wiped her bloody hands on her saddle blanket. She took a deep breath, forcing her heart to slow down. She rode into the yard. "Evening, Sadie," Miller said. He did not smile. "Marshal," Sadie replied. She dismounted. Her knees shook slightly, but she locked them straight. She walked toward the porch with her chin up. "We are hunting a band of Apache," Miller said, resting his hand on his gun belt. 4 men. They ambushed a stagecoach near Tumbleweed yesterday, shot the driver, stole the county payroll. Sadie knew the truth instantly. The men she found were tied up and left for dead to bake in the sun. They did not have a single coin on them. The real robbers had pinned the crime on the natives and left them to die to cover their tracks. She saw the lie clearly, but her face remained a mask of polite ignorance. "Haven't seen anyone, Marshal," Sadie said. "Just chasing a stray calf near the ridge." Miller stepped off the porch. He looked at Sadie's empty hands. He noticed the damp spot on her shirt. He looked at the missing canteen on her saddle. "You look exhausted, girl. You lose your water out there?" "Dropped it in a gorge," Sadie lied smoothly. "Calf got away too." Miller stared at her. The silence stretched. The desert wind howled through the porch beams, kicking up red dust around their boots. It was a test of nerve. Sadie thought of her grandfather holding the flank at Gettysburg. Hold the line. She did not blink. She did not look away. Miller tipped his hat. "Keep your doors locked, Abigail. These men are desperate. If they come here, they will not ask for a meal. They will take your lives." Miller and Tommy mounted their horses. They rode off toward the eastern ridge. Sadie waited until the dust settled on the road. She rushed immediately to the barn. She grabbed the heavy leather harnesses for the draft horses. "Sadie," a quiet voice called out. Abigail stood in the barn doorway. The dying sun cast a long shadow behind her. She looked at the heavy leather harnesses in Sadie's hands. She looked at the faint smears of blood Sadie had missed on her shirt. "You didn't drop your canteen," Abigail said softly. "No, Mama." "Are they badly hurt?" "Dying," Sadie said. Her voice cracked, just a fraction. "Left for the buzzards, tied to trees and barbed wire. It wasn't right, Mama. I couldn't leave them." Abigail coughed. It was a deep rattling sound that shook her frail frame. She leaned against a wooden post to catch her breath. When she finally looked up, her eyes were not filled with fear. They were bright, fierce, and entirely resolved. "Hitch the wagon," Abigail ordered, "and bring my medical box. The big one." The moon was a thin crescent that night. The darkness over the New Austin territory was absolute. Sadie drove the wagon without a lantern. She navigated entirely by memory and starlight. Every bump in the dirt road made her wince. She knew Marshall Miller could be camped anywhere out in the brush. She reached the box canyon just before midnight. She whistled a low, two-note call. The sound of a nightjar. A shadow detached itself from the rocks. It was Charles. He walked with a severe limp, but he was supporting the broad warrior, who was barely conscious. The third man, Javier, stumbled behind them. Chief Rains Fall walked beside them. His posture remained incredibly straight, despite the agony of his torn muscles. They loaded the men into the back of the wagon. Sadie threw old burlap feed sacks over them to conceal their shapes. "Stay very low. Do not make a sound," Sadie whispered into the dark. The ride back took 2 terrifying hours. It was an excruciating crawl. The tension in the air was suffocating. At one point, Sadie saw the orange glow of a campfire on a distant ridge. It was Marshall Miller's camp. She held her breath and kept the draft horses moving at a slow, steady walk. Her hands gripped the leather reins so tightly her knuckles ached. They reached the ranch safely. The barn doors were open. Abigail was waiting inside with a single, dimmed oil lantern. They carried the men into the back hay stall. Abigail did not ask questions. She went straight to work. She was a frail woman, but her hands were steady and practiced. She cleaned the broad warrior's head wound with whiskey. He groaned loudly. Charles quickly clamped a hand over the man's mouth to muffle the sound. Abigail threaded a needle. She sewed the gash shut in the dim light. 7 neat stitches. Then she moved to Charles. She carefully inspected his wrists. The purple color was fading, but the flesh was torn deeply by the wire. She applied a thick, soothing paste of yarrow and honey. She bound his wrists in clean linen bandages. Chief Rains Fall watched Abigail. He watched this dying widow spend her meager, precious medical supplies on strangers who the law wanted dead. "You risk everything for us," Rains Fall said quietly. His gravelly voice filled the quiet barn. "Why?" Abigail wiped her hands on a damp rag. She looked at the chief. "My husband died in the war. He fought so men wouldn't be put in chains. If I let men die in wire on my own land, his death meant nothing." Rains Fall bowed his head. It was a gesture of profound respect. "Your husband was a true warrior. His spirit lives fiercely in his women." The next 3 days were agonizing. The 4 men hid in the barn loft, buried under piles of loose hay and old blankets. Sadie went about her daily chores normally. She fed the chickens. She repaired the cattle fences. She acted exactly like a bored, tired ranch girl. But the danger was ever present. Every afternoon, Marshall Miller rode past the property. Sometimes he stopped at the well for water. Sometimes he just sat on his horse by the property line, watching the barn. He was highly suspicious. He was a veteran hunting dog who had caught a faint scent but couldn't locate the prey. The tension mounted daily. The ranch's food supplies were already low, and now there were 4 more mouths to feed. The injured men needed to eat to heal properly. Sadie began skipping her own meals entirely. She snuck her portions of dried meat and cornbread into the barn loft. One afternoon, Charles caught her doing it. He saw her stomach rumble loudly in the quiet loft. He pushed the tin plate of cornbread back toward her. A scout cannot protect the camp if she is starving, Charles said softly. Eat it, Sadie said sharply. You need your strength to ride out of here. And you? I'm stubborn. That's better than strong. Charles smiled. It was the first time she had seen any of them smile. It was a small, quiet expression of warmth. You are like the badger, small but very angry. Sadie crossed her arms, trying not to smile back. I'll take that as a compliment. It is the highest compliment, Charles assured her. Downstairs, the heavy barn doors rattled loudly. Sadie froze. Charles instantly reached for a rusted pitchfork. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floorboards below. Heavy boots, the distinct jingle of silver spurs. Sadie? Marshall Miller's voice boomed up to the loft. I know you're up there, girl. Come on down. We need to have a serious talk. Sadie looked at Charles. She put a trembling finger to her lips. She climbed down the wooden ladder slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Miller was standing by the empty horse stalls. He was holding something in his leather-gloved hand. It was Sadie's canteen, the one she had left with the broad warrior in the canyon to keep him alive. Found this out by the canyon yesterday, Miller said softly. He turned the metal canteen over. The bottom was stamped with the initials HM. Now why would you tell me you lost this in a gorge when my deputy found it sitting nice and pretty in a patch of bloody dirt? Miller unholstered his heavy revolver. He didn't point it at Sadie. He just held it loosely by his side, letting the threat hang in the air. I'm coming up that ladder, Sadie, Miller said. The air in the barn went dead cold, and if I find what I think I'm gonna find, you are hanging right next to them. Miller's heavy boot hit the first rung of the wooden ladder. The dry wood creaked loudly. Above him, in the dusty shadows of the loft, Charles shifted his weight. The rusted tines of the pitchfork caught a faint sliver of sunlight slipping through the roof boards. Marshall, a quiet voice called out from the barn entrance. It was not loud, but it stopped Miller cold. Abigail stood in the doorway. She held a heavy, double-barreled shotgun. The stock was tucked firmly against her frail shoulder. The twin steel barrels were leveled directly at Miller's chest. Her hands were thin and pale, but they did not shake. Put the gun away, Abigail, Miller said. His voice dropped to a dangerous, soft timbre. You are interfering with the law. The law does not trespass in my barn, Abigail replied. Her chest rattled with a suppressed cough. My husband gave me this scattergun. He said it was for coyotes, 2-legged or 4. Miller looked from the dark muzzles of the shotgun to Abigail's pale, determined face. He measured her resolve. He saw the ghost of Major Hosea Matthews in her eyes. The air in the barn grew thick with dust and the smell of dried hay. That canteen, Miller pointed with his left hand, keeping his right near his holster. It has Hosea's initials. I found it where 4 outlaws were cut loose. I gave that canteen to a drifter, Sadie lied. She kept her voice entirely flat. 3 days ago, he begged for water at the well. I didn't ask his name. Miller did not believe her. The lie was plain. But a loaded shotgun at 10 paces was a bad wager for any man. Miller stepped away from the ladder. He backed up slowly, his eyes never leaving Abigail. He holstered his revolver with deliberate slowness. You are making a terrible mistake, Miller said. He walked past Abigail, stepping out into the blinding afternoon sunlight. I am riding back to town. When I return, I am bringing 20 men. We will tear this barn apart board by board. And if I find a single Apache on this property, I will burn the cabin down with both of you inside. He mounted his horse. He spurred the animal hard and rode away toward the eastern ridge. Abigail lowered the shotgun. She collapsed against the barn door frame. A violent fit of coughing overtook her. Sadie ran forward, wrapping her arms around her mother's shaking shoulders. In the loft, Chief Rain's fall let out a slow, measured breath. He looked at Charles. The time for hiding had passed. That evening, the ranch was dead quiet. It was the heavy, suffocating silence that comes just before a flash flood. In the dim light of the barn, the 4 men prepared to leave. The broad warrior, Paita, was standing on his own. He was weak, and his head was wrapped in white linen, but he could ride. Javier checked the leather cinches on the saddles. Sadie walked into the stalls. She led out 2 horses, a gray gelding and a sturdy bay mare. It was half of her remaining livestock. Losing them, meant the ranch would likely go bankrupt before the winter freeze. She handed the leather reins to Rains Fall. "Take them," Sadie said. "They are strong. They know the rocky trails. They will get you to the high country." Rains Fall looked at the horses. He looked at Sadie's calloused hands. He understood the profound weight of this sacrifice. In the West, a horse was a family's livelihood. Giving away two was giving away survival. "We cannot repay this," Rains Fall said quietly. "I didn't ask for payment," Sadie replied. She reached out and brushed a smudge of dirt from the bay mare's nose. "Just ride fast. Miller will be back by dawn." Abigail walked into the barn. She carried a heavy canvas sack. It contained the absolute last of their supplies: dried salted beef, half a loaf of hard bread, and a glass jar filled with dark willow bark tea. She handed the sack to Charles. "For the pain," she said, pointing to the glass jar, "drink it when the fever flares." Charles took the sack. He bowed his head slightly. "You are good people. The world is harsh, but it has not made your hearts cold." Rains Fall stepped toward Abigail. He reached up to his neck. He unclasped a thick leather cord. Hanging from it was a single, massive grizzly bear claw, polished smooth by years of wear. "My father wore this," Rains Fall said. His deep voice echoed in the quiet barn. "It is a symbol of the protector. The one who stands before the fire. You wear it now." He placed the necklace into Abigail's trembling hand. Her fingers closed tightly around the smooth bone. "Go," Abigail whispered. "May God hide your tracks." The four men mounted up. They rode out the back doors of the barn, slipping quietly into the vast, dark expanse of the desert. The rhythmic thud of hooves faded quickly into the night wind. Sadie and Abigail did not sleep that night. They sat at the small wooden kitchen table. The oil lamp flickered between them. Sadie systematically cleaned her grandfather's heavy revolver. She oiled the cylinder. She loaded 6 heavy brass cartridges, one by one. "We have done nothing wrong," Abigail said. She stared blankly into her empty teacup. "Miller doesn't care about right or wrong, Mama," Sadie said. She snapped the gun's cylinder shut with a sharp click. "He cares about a hanging." Dawn broke over the New Austin territory. It cast a bloody orange light across the jagged canyon lands. Then, the ground began to vibrate. It was a low, steady rumble. The tin plates, stacked on the wooden shelf, rattled softly against each other. Sadie stood up. She walked to the front window and pushed aside the cotton curtain. A massive plume of red dust rose over the eastern ridge. It rolled toward the ranch like a storm cloud. Miller had kept his promise. He rode at the very front. Beside him was Deputy Tommy. Behind them rode a posse of 25 heavily armed men. They carried Winchester repeaters, double-barreled shotguns, and coiled hangman's ropes tied to their saddles. They rode with the grim, silent purpose of an execution squad. Sadie walked to the front door. She stepped onto the wooden porch. She held the heavy revolver down by her side. Abigail stepped out right behind her, holding the scattergun. The posse fanned out across the dirt yard. They formed a tight, suffocating half-circle around the front of the cabin. The horses stamped their iron shoes, snorting and kicking up red dust. Miller halted his dark horse 10 yards from the porch. He looked down at the two women. Then he looked at the open, empty barn doors. "Search the property," Miller ordered his men. 6 deputies dismounted. They ran toward the barn with their rifles raised. They kicked the interior doors open. Minutes passed in heavy, tense silence. Sadie kept her eyes locked dead on Miller. One of the deputies jogged back to the yard. "Barn's empty, Marshal, but there's fresh tracks leading north into the scrub. 4 horses. They were here, left a few hours ago." Miller's face twisted into an ugly sneer. He looked down at Sadie with pure contempt. "You aided and abetted murderers," Miller shouted. "You gave them your own horses. You are traitors to the law." "They were innocent men," Sadie shouted back. Her voice rang out clear and sharp across the dusty yard, refusing to break. "You left them to die in barbed wire to cover up a robbery you couldn't solve." A low murmur rippled through the posse. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles, glancing at each other. "Arrest them," Miller commanded, pointing a leather-gloved finger at the women. "Burn the cabin to the dirt. Burn the barn. Leave absolutely nothing standing." 3 deputies stepped forward. uncoiling their heavy ropes. Sadie raised her revolver. Abigail raised the shotgun. "First man who puts a boot on my porch gets a chest full of lead," Abigail said. Her voice was raspy, but it carried the unyielding weight of solid stone. The three deputies hesitated. They stopped in the dirt. Miller drew his own revolver. He cocked the hammer back with a loud metallic clack. He leveled the barrel straight at Sadie's head. "Put the guns down, little girl," Miller growled, "or I end this right now." The standoff had reached its breaking point. The tension was a wire pulled tight enough to snap. Death was seconds away. But before a single trigger could be pulled, a new sound washed over the canyon. It was not the rumble of 25 horses. It was the earth-shattering thunder of 300. The dust did not come from the road. It came from everywhere. The low rumble swelled into a deafening roar. The earth beneath their boots shook violently. Miller's dark horse panicked. It bucked and sidestepped, kicking up clouds of red dirt. The deputies desperately fought to control their mounts. Sadie did not lower her revolver. She kept her eyes locked on Miller, but she saw the color completely drain from his face. Miller looked past the cabin. He looked up at the towering eastern ridge. Sadie shifted her gaze. The jagged, red rock skyline was no longer empty. It was entirely covered. A solid wall of men and horses lined the ridge, stretching as far as the eye could see. They were Apache. Not 4, not 40. 300 warriors. They sat on their painted horses in absolute terrifying silence. The desert wind whipped through their dark hair. The morning sun glinted off the steel barrels of 300 repeating rifles. The sheer scale of the war party was overwhelming. They held the high ground. They had the posse completely surrounded. Marshal Miller's hand began to shake. His revolver felt suddenly very heavy. He was a man used to holding all the power. In the span of a single heartbeat, he had become entirely powerless. A single rider detached from the massive line on the ridge. He rode down the steep, rocky incline with steady, practiced ease. He rode a gray gelding. It was Sadie's horse. Chief Rainsfall guided the gelding into the ranch yard. He did not rush. He carried no weapon in his hands. Charles rode close behind him, holding a long, feathered lance. The posse instinctively parted. The deputies backed their horses away, their eyes wide with raw, unfiltered terror. Rainsfall stopped his horse directly between Miller and the wooden porch. He looked down at the marshal. His dark eyes were as cold and unforgiving as a winter storm. "Drop your iron," Rainsfall commanded. His gravelly voice did not need to shout. It cut through the morning air like a blade. Miller hesitated. His pride fought against his survival instincts. He looked at the 300 rifles aimed down from the ridge. He uncocked his revolver. He let it slip from his fingers. It hit the dirt with a dull thud. One by one, the 25 deputies followed suit. Shotguns, rifles, and revolvers clattered onto the dry earth. "You brought a rope to a widow's home," Rainsfall said to Miller. "You hunt men for crimes they did not commit. You have poisoned this land long enough." Rainsfall pointed toward the distant horizon. "Take your men, walk away. If I see your star in this valley again, the buzzards will not leave enough of you to bury." Miller did not say a word. He dismounted his panicked horse. He turned and began walking down the long, dusty road toward town. His deputies followed. They left their weapons. They left their pride. They walked in total, humiliating defeat. The yard fell quiet again. The dust began to settle. Sadie slowly lowered her heavy revolver. Abigail leaned her scattergun against the doorframe. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank onto the wooden porch bench, breathing heavily. Rainsfall dismounted the gray gelding. He walked toward the porch. "I told you to ride for the high country," Sadie said. Her voice shook, the adrenaline finally leaving her veins. "You rode right back into the fire." "A general does not abandon a loyal soldier," Rainsfall replied softly. "You held the flank. We returned to reinforce it." He raised his hand and signaled to the ridge. Dozens of warriors began riding down into the valley, but they were not coming to fight. They were herding animals. A magnificent herd of wild mustangs, 50 strong, poured into the grazing pastures behind the barn.